Good evening. Wow, that's a large crowd. Well, my name is John Flores, and I'm the Dean of the College of Agriculture here at Kansas State University, and I'm also Director of K-State Research and Extension, and I welcome you all to this first, hopefully of many series about the global food systems. And hopefully you will be happy at the end of this lecture, but I want to say a few words before we start with our honored guest today. It takes a lot of effort to pull something like this and put it together, and I want to start by thanking the committee that has worked for over a year now to really pull together ideas with all their energy and their time and really pay attention to the details. So would the members of the committee that planned this lecture, would you please stand and help me recognize them? So this is the first Henry C. Gardner Global Food Systems Lecture Series, and let me tell you what the purpose of that is. It is to provide education and science to the global food system. The series allows university students, faculty, staff, the public, the citizens, to really interact with leading U.S. and international food industry officials and other scientists from many points of view. What you will hear today is one of those points of view. Next time, next series, we may have a different point of view. The food system is a very complex system. All of us participate, either as producers or as scientists or as consumers. It really spans the globe. We have to eat probably 3 times a day, some of us more. But it is a complex system and has been with us for a long time. It has evolved over time. It's not the same today as it was 20, 50, 100 years ago. It will change again. It will be different 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 years from now. The population will grow from 7 billion today to probably 9.5 by 2050, to probably 11 billion by the end of the century. We will have to feed all of those people, and we will have to feed them with the food that's appropriate to them. It's a complex system with many, many complex challenges. Not one college, not one university, not one company, not one small group of people can really resolve all of those challenges. That's why about a year ago, our president at K-State started the Global Food Systems Initiative, and this is really the first lecture for the global food systems, but also the first Henry C. Gardner lecture. It is my honor to really be here in front of you, and it's my honor to have worked with the Gardner family to really put this series together to really honor and recognize Henry C. Gardner. His son, Mark, will be here in just a minute to tell you a few things about himself and Henry C. Gardner and their business. But I do want you to know that they're an exemplary family with an exemplary business. And when you think that less than 1% of the American population really works in agriculture, less than 1% works to produce the food for the rest of us, it tells you how that system has evolved over time. Because 100 years ago, more than 50% of the people worked at the farm. So, with that in mind, let me bring up to the stage Mark Gardner, and he will tell you just a few words about the Gardner family and their ranch. Mark?
Thank you so much, Dean and Director Flores. Outstanding. What a great crowd. You know, when we think about these things and we think about what I like to call the K-State way, you know, this is a special place. And, you know, if we have an idea and we have a curiosity, oh, what can we figure out? And, you know, that's the way my dad was. It was like, you know, he'd have a question, and where would we call often? We would call Kansas State University to see if we could find an answer. And, you know, like many of you in this room, how did my family end up in Ashland, Kansas? You know, we think about the history of Kansas State University, the Morrill Act, the land grant, the first land grant university, 1863. Well, Western Kansas wasn't civilized till much later, and my family and Henry's family moved to Ashland, Kansas, southwest of Ashland, Kansas, in a covered wagon in 1885. And, you know, as my sons are here, and we talk about the Homestead Act, but if you went out there and lived in that God-forsaken country, you got to stay there for 7 years, then that 160 acres became yours. And so Henry Clay Gardner, which would have been Henry Gardner's dad, made that travel in 1885, and they were there for 7 years until they starved out and they lost that place. But my granddad was born in that hole in the ground, which was a dugout, in 1889. And so it's, you know, we had that place. We had several other places, just like everybody here in this room. You know, that's American history is, you know, we had it, we lost it, we started again. And we think about Kansas State University, and we think about, you know, where we are in the world and what we can do. Do we have the most opulent of everything? No. But do we have the attitude and the ability to question, what can we do? You know, there's been a lot of nice things said about the Gardner family, but this didn't happen just by ourselves. It was our friends and our customers, and, you know, our operation went from a homestead that we lost in about 1895, 1894, whatever that math was on that. Then they lost that place. But, you know, they built that from a starved-out farm ranch in southwest Kansas to where today our operation supports 9 families. And so we're proud to bring that to you today. And my dad had impeccable timing. You know, there's many in the room that knew Henry Gardner, and Dad passed away on January 21st at 7:01 a.m. So he's finally free, and he's able to enjoy this evening with us tonight. And I say 7:01 a.m. because, you know, very meticulous. We must measure it. We must get it down. If we can measure it, then we can quantify it, and then we can measure our success. So he dedicated his career, and many of the emerging technologies became a pattern and a way of life for him. But it was right here at Kansas State University. You know, back then it was artificial insemination. Ultimately, it was gathering more data, you know, to where in recent years, I mean, cool stuff like genomic information. And Dr. Fraley's going to share a lot of that. But there's really been a beef cattle revolution. And that revolution was led by men like your father and my father, and women like your mother and my mother, to make this a better place. And when you think about documenting these genetic improvements, whether it's with plants or with animals, every question that we have deserves an answer. Every idea that we have deserves thoughtful consideration. So when we think about that, and, you know, we may have discussions, and what was the goal of our family when we came to try with this idea that, frankly, our friends and our customers, and we helped a little bit, we had the idea, but it was the great people of Kansas State University that made this happen. And we want to honor Henry's intellectual curiosity. And Dean Flores, what he said to me, what are you trying to achieve, and what do you want to do? We want to bring honor and discussion and education to Kansas State University. Our vision for this series is to bring those things to Kansas State University, to bring that discussion, to bring that dialogue, to bring it together to where we can make this a better place. And I can think of no finer place. And, you know, my sons get tired of me whining at them about connecting the dots and doing this, that, and the other. Well, if we connect the dots, that motto of, I know a spot that I love full well, you know, the K-State way is to figure it out, to get it done, learn something, and make the world a better place. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. In just a minute, I will introduce our provost, Dr. April Mason. Our president couldn't be here today, but our provost is here, and she will introduce our speaker. But before we start, I want to tell you a little bit about the logistics. Dr. Fraley has agreed to answer some questions, so as he goes through his lecture, please keep notes, mental or otherwise. We do have 2 mics on either side of the amphitheater. One is over there, see the hand, and the other is over here. So please, at the end of the lecture, come down and stand in line, and we'll try to get as many questions as we can as the time allows. So with that, let me tell you a few words about our provost. Dr. Mason came to us 5 years ago from Colorado State, where she was the dean of the College of the equivalent of human ecology, human sciences. I know April fairly well because we spent some time at Purdue, both being on the faculty there. So we go back some time. She's a nutritionist and a food scientist, and so she understands global food systems firsthand. So would you please welcome Dr. April Mason, our provost.
What a day. Let me make the distinction. I'm glad that John told you my credentials. I am a nutrition professional and a food scientist, but Mark and I were just talking, and we clearly come from different areas of the global food systems spectrum. He said he was asked to keep it between the ditches. I always say keep it between the lines, but we still represent very much the same thing. I want to welcome you to this inaugural Henry C. Gardner lecture on global food systems. Clearly, by the turnout in McCain, we have touched a very important issue, and we look forward to the talk this evening. I do want to express my sincere condolences to the Gardner family. Not only do we have a son of Henry, we have 2 grandsons of Henry and a grandnephew of Henry here in the audience. Many other members of the family are back home getting ready for a wonderful celebration of a life well lived for Henry. So you and I have the opportunity to be here at the inaugural Henry C. Gardner Global Food Systems Lecture. Why global food systems? Why here at Kansas State University? Because we see Kansas State University as a global leader among universities for research in animal health, plant science, food safety, and food security. We bring together expertise to support the world's food production, distribution, consumption, and nutrition. It's only fitting that we have this new lecture series dedicated to the global food systems. I thank Mark and the entire Gardner family for endowing this lecture series, and the College of Agriculture, K-State Research and Extension for creating this opportunity with the Gardner family. Now let me introduce our inaugural speaker for the evening. We gave him a little hard time earlier this afternoon at the reception, saying, being the inaugural speaker, a lot of weight on those shoulders. But I think you'll agree with me, he bears that weight very well. Dr. Robert Fraley is the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Monsanto. He has been chosen very carefully as the first speaker in the Kansas State University Henry C. Gardner Global Food Systems Lecture Series, and we're very excited to welcome him here to our campus. Not only have we gotten him to give this lecture, we've taken most of his afternoon. He's met with undergraduate students, graduate students, faculty and staff, and administrators of our campus. In 2013, Dr. Fraley and 2 colleagues received the prestigious World Food Prize for their achievements in founding, developing, and applying modern agricultural biotechnology. This wonderful World Food Prize, recognizing incredible contributions to the global food system in our world. Kansas State University has provided education and science to the global food system for more than 150 years. Dr. Fraley is truly a pioneer in developing plant biotechnology, advancing breeding and crop improvement techniques in the area of agriculture for many decades. He is an excellent choice as our inaugural speaker in this series. In 1983, Fraley and 3 other Monsanto scientists were the first to genetically modify plants, and 13 years later, he helped to lead the successful commercial launch of Roundup-ready soybeans and Bollgard insect-protected cotton in the United States. What an achievement. By 2013, Dr. Fraley's work in this area contributed to crops growing on more than 430 million acres around the world by 18 million farmers. It's a little hard to get my head around. More than 90% of the farmers are small, resource-constrained farmers in developing countries. Truly the reason that he received the World Food Prize. That prize, the World Food Prize, is considered the world's most prestigious award to recognize individuals who advanced human development by improving the quality, the quantity, and the availability of food. As Mark Gardner has explained, the purpose of this lecture series is to bring leaders in the global food systems area throughout the world to present their views, to open a conversation, and to deliberate on this incredibly important issue. Also, as Mark said, we may not always agree with, but we do respect the speakers that say it. We know genetically modifying plants is a controversial issue, and it is to some, and perhaps not to others in the audience this evening. And that's okay. We want the dialogue. We want the conversation. Please listen to Dr. Fraley's comments and give our speakers' ideas thoughtful consideration. That's what we're here for this evening. So now please join me in giving a very rousing Kansas State University welcome to Dr. Robert Fraley.
Thank you. Thanks. Wow. Thanks. Sometimes you should stop when you're ahead. I really appreciate. I'm floored by the turnout here. I think that means there's a lot of interest in agriculture and food, and we're going to have a great dialogue tonight. I'd like to start by thanking the provost and the dean and all the faculty for pulling together a great afternoon. Of course, my favorite part was getting a chance to meet with the graduate students and the undergrads, and I think I've got 2 or 3 signed on to join me at Monsanto at some point. So I consider it a great day, and what a wonderful honor. I mean, to have the opportunity to give the first lecture on the global food system, which is absolutely key. I mean, we are a global world, and we're trading grains around the world, and our opportunity for the future to help meet these daunting challenges is to manage the food chain, both locally and globally, and that's what we need to do. And it was a special privilege to be recognized as the first speaker to have the opportunity to be part of the Gardner family lecture, and to have a chance to honor Mr. Henry C. Gardner's legacy and accomplishments. I had a chance to do a lot of background reading. I never had a chance to meet him, but when you think about the pioneering work that he did, the innovation, and then the family's foresight in really creating a dialogue about this, it's really a remarkable insight, and it's a real privilege to be part of that, and I hope to add to your understanding, and we'll spend I'll do the good and the bad news. The bad news is I'm probably going to show too many slides. But the good news is that there isn't going to be a test at the end, so you can just relax and enjoy. But what I want to do is spend a few moments kind of setting up the conversation on the global food chain and some of the challenges and issues. I'd like to talk about some of the technologies and tools and put those into perspective. And then let's spend our time in a great dialogue and move forward and address the questions that you have. And for those of you who want to follow the dialogue even deeper, I've given you my Twitter account. You can reach me at Rob Fraley, and I try to address all of those questions and comments. I think one of the reasons we have so many folks here in the room tonight is there's so much interest, and that interest can be driven both by the science opportunity, the challenges that lie ahead, concerns that we all share over food security and the environment, and the opportunity to mitigate what's going on. I'm sure you're all familiar with the demographics, but let me just frame the challenge this way. And I celebrated my birthday yesterday. I'm 62 years old, and so I really want to speak. I had a chance to talk to a lot of grad students and students today, and here's why it's so real. It just seemed like a few years ago I was sitting in the front row of auditoriums like this listening to speakers, and the reality of it is the next 30 or 35 years is going to go by in a flash. And importantly, the conversations, the decisions we make, the policies we put in place today, you will live with. And when you're my age, we will either have made the right decisions or not. And that's why I think this conversation is so important. If we frame the challenge, I think about it this way. Everybody knows world population continues to grow. The FAO has actually revised upward the 2050 target to 9.5 billion. And the good news is the reason population levels have gone up is there's been so incredible progress in addressing healthcare challenges across Asia and Africa, and so that's a good thing. Probably as important a statistic is that the middle class will explode over the next 30 years. We'll see another 2 to 3 billion people join the middle class, and that's a result of world wealth creation, and a big part of that will be folks living in Asia and across Africa, and that's incredible. But that will create an increased demand for healthier foods, more calories in some cases, and more food. If you do the simple math, to be safe, we need to double the food supply between now and 2050. Let me say that again, because if you say that really quickly, it seems like a long way off. That means in the next 35 years, we have to double the food supply. Let me put it in perspective. We will have to produce more food between now and 2050 than we have in the entire history of the world cumulatively. So this is a huge challenge, and I don't want to underplay it, but I'm going to put all my cards on the table and tell you I'm an optimist that I believe we can do it. And that's also recognizing the fact that there's other things we need to do in terms of eating healthier. We know that water will be a huge challenge, and I know that here at Kansas State, a lot of research and a lot of interest in this topic. It will be critical. Obviously, global warming and the implications that it has and the things that we can do to mitigate are an important conversation. And then the policies, how we bring all this into actions that promote good sustainable farming practices, that promote actions that support food security. I'd like to highlight just for a second the impact of climate change, because that can be controversial and with different groups. And I've studied those facts, and I actually have commissioned research with the scientists in our organization nearly a decade ago to look at the data and determine what's going on and what we can do. And I think everybody fundamentally knows that temperatures have changed. It is fundamentally getting warmer, and a lot of people think immediately about drought and heat stress, and that will be an important consideration for crops. But even a 1 or 2 degree change in a local temperature in a local environment can change when insects hatch or when diseases will have an outbreak. And so a big challenge of putting ourselves in a position to mitigate and address climate change is going to fall into, using basic tools in breeding and molecular biology and chemistry and precision agriculture to better understand and control pests, to better understand how we can use water effectively and how we can breed for crops that can withstand the kind of drought pressures. Like I said, if anybody, and I'm sure you all tell the stories about how it was different from when you grew up. This is just a 20-year snapshot looking at Kansas in terms of the temperature zones that existed in 1990 versus 2012 today. And you can see a remarkable change. And, that can be replicated across Illinois, across the Midwest. In our case, as a company, we are now doing breeding trials for corn and soybean in southern Canada because the climate has changed so much in just the 20 years that we've been in the breeding business that it will be possible to grow high-yielding crops, in southern Canada. So it's clear that we have seen the implications of climate change, and that's true globally around the world. And clearly, as a scientific organization, we work hard to look at what things we can do differently, what can we anticipate, and how can we address this challenge. Now, I said I'll put all my cards on the table, and I'm an absolute optimist. And I'll end basically laying out my vision and my view of what's possible. But the reason I'm optimistic at the highest level is this. Probably the two greatest technological innovations of our lifetime are the advances in biology and the advances in information technology. If you think about what's going on, the advances in biology have changed literally the way we breed crops today. I mean, imagine, the ability to sequence every single gene in a corn plant or a tomato plant and, have markers and be able to identify every single gene that comes from the mom and dad to create those new kids. That's possible today. Or the biotech traits. We're able to precisely add new genes for the future. And then couple that to the advances in information technology, where today every single field in the United States, all 30 million of them, have been mapped. And increasingly, each one of those fields is being gridded into an area the size of this stage so that farmers can literally farm meter by meter and optimize their inputs and use that information, very powerfully. And that combination of these incredible advances in biology and information technology are converging on farms around the world. And I think for me, that's what drives the optimism that we can fuel that next green revolution if we have societal's permission, if we have the policies to utilize these tools effectively. And when I talk, everybody, knowing that I'm from Monsanto, knowing that I helped develop the first biotech products and GMO seeds, they kind of expect me to come up here and say GMO is the answer for everything. And I will tell you, if I look back at the contributions our group has made, but more broadly what the scientific community has created, for me the most remarkable story is how these tools have literally changed the way we breed crops. Having that knowledge of every single gene, being able to breed faster, more precisely, to be able to target, the introduction of diverse germplasm from breeding pools around the world has been game-changing. As a result of that, we are just starting to see increases in the rate of gain of every breeding cycle, the ability to map and tag multiple disease and drought and yield traits and bring them together in ways that have never been possible before. And so the breeding story is really the one I highlight. And clearly that's been augmented by advances in technologies that literally let us take each individual seed from a corn plant or a soybean plant or a wheat plant and shave a small sample so that we can do a DNA test. And that's why I say from a breeding perspective, not only are we able now to breed gene by gene, but literally seed by seed. And that greatly increases our probability of creating new combinations that have never existed to drive our yield and our opportunity for the future tremendously. Now, I was talking to Mark earlier, and you inspired me that I think we need to add to our robotics capability where we're doing the seed chipping capability. I think we need to add like a prime rib or a nice T-bone steak testing analysis. So I'm gonna have the team in our robotics group work on that, because I think with a few more markers we can pick out the perfect T-bone. So we're gonna work on that as we go forward. But importantly, the cost curve for doing this. A decade ago, this was frankly only possible to do with corn and super high value crops. Today, this is being applied to all crops. All the fresh fruits and vegetables have been sequenced and mapped. Increasingly, we're working with organizations around the world to start the sequencing on orphan crops, whether it's the millets, the chickpeas, the cowpea products, and crops that are important crops in certain local countries in diet. But the ability to do this and have that precise blueprint of every crop is what is game-changing in my mind. And we look back on the impact that these advanced technologies have had. It will be this space that drives the difference. But you didn't expect me not to talk about biotechnology and GMOs, so let me just add a couple of comments. And I'll talk about some of the controversy in a little bit, and I'm sure we'll get a few questions on that later. But let me point to the thing that, back in 1983, when we first put the first biotech transgene in a petunia plant, I would have never dreamed, standing in front of this audience in 2015, that this technology would have become the fastest adopted technology in the history of agriculture. Today, GMO crops are grown in over 30 countries. They're grown on over 400 million acres, which is about a quarter of the world's farmland. And what's important, and this is the point I want to emphasize, there are more farmers outside the United States using this technology than in the U.S. And many, many, many of those are smallholders in India, in China, and in Africa. And the beauty of this technology, and this is what's so key, if you think about what we get out of all the breeding efforts, what we get out of all the biotechnology efforts, it's a better seed. That's what this produces. A higher yielding seed, a better disease resistant, a better insect resistant seed, and importantly, every farmer in the world, no matter how big or how small, knows what to do with the seed. So if we can give a smallholder a better seed, it can transform their farming operations, and that's what we can see. If we give a large farmer in Brazil and U.S. the technology, they also accrue benefits from the technology. And it's really important that we address small farmers. Because frankly, I'll tell you, there's no way to feed the world and double the food supply without ensuring that small farmers increase their yields dramatically. I believe with our tools we can double the yields of corn, soybean, cotton, and wheat in the U.S. But in Africa, in Asia, we need to triple and quadruple yields. They start at a lower level, and we have every opportunity to do that and achieve that in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of biotechnology. I think probably more important than what I say, I'd refer everybody to this study by Klumper and Quam. This was just published before the end of the year. And what's important of this, first of all, these are German economists funded by the German government. And as you know, Germany is not a big supporter of GMO or biotech crops. But this is probably the most sophisticated analysis of all of the studies that have talked about the benefits of biotech crops. And you can see their summary here in terms of, overall, as they've analyzed these hundreds of studies, what farmers have experienced is an increase in yield, a reduction in pesticide use, and importantly, an increase in farmer profitability. And that's really why we've seen such phenomenal adoption of this technology around the world. Growing up on a farm in Illinois, realizing how much time my dad spent making purchase decisions, I can tell you that there's no farmer in the world that you can fool with the technology. You might get him to try something one time, but if it doesn't work, if it doesn't provide benefit, you're not going to achieve 400 plus million acres of farmers utilizing the technology. So I'm really proud of the broad global acceptance of the technology by countries around the world, and we continue to see progress every year in new countries, new crops adapting the technology. But what I'm really the proudest of is the incredible track record of safety that the GMO technology has had. Let me give you this perspective to think about. The very first gene cloning experiment was done in the 1970s out in California. Herb Boyer and Stan Cohen did the first gene transfer experiment. That was done in the 1970s. We in our laboratories in St. Louis made the first transgenic plant in the 1980s. We field tested and commercialized the first commercial crops in the 90s. So wherever you want to start in that calculation, we now have 20, 30, or 40 years of experience with GMO technology and GMO crops. And in that entire history, there's never been a single report related to food or feed safety with the technology. And for me, that's really impressive. And that's really a reflection of two things. First of all, what we're talking about is genes that make RNA and protein like every other gene in our bodies or in any other form of life. So it starts with an inherent safety. But secondly, these products are reviewed extensively. Just to put this in perspective, if I were the head of a drug company, I would get FDA approval to sell a new drug. That would be my job. I would have been successful. We could sell the product in the United States. But being head of the biotech effort for Monsanto, we get approval in the U.S. from the EPA, the FDA, and the USDA. And then because we're so good as a U.S. farmer to produce grain that gets shipped around the world, we get regulatory approval by 40 other countries around the world who all have their ministers of health and environment and agriculture. So these are by far the most thoroughly studied food products in the marketplace and on the grocery store shelf. And that also, I think, is really an important testament of their safety. And there's a huge consensus. It's real popular these days to talk about the scientific consensus around being pro-science on vaccinations or pro-science on climate change. Every organization of note around the world, from AMA to the National Academy of Science, the American Medical Association, has given GMOs the thumbs up in terms of their safety. But that being said, it's very clear that there's more work to be done on communication. There's a huge interest that people have in terms of the dialogue on food, and it's something that I recognize that we need to do more and a better job on. If I could look back on my career and just tell you the biggest mistake our company made is, we were excited by the technology. We were a strong scientific organization. We launched these products in the mid-90s, and we put every bit of our attention on talking to farmers about these products and their benefits, and we didn't pay any attention to consumers or consumer education. And that has bitten us, because in the absence of information from companies or from industry, the internet has been filled with a lot of misinformation, a lot of things that just frankly are not accurate, and now we need to do the double work of both correcting and moving forward on a communication front. And that's something we're doing, and that means getting involved a lot more with social media, with reaching consumers in the way that they want to get their information, and that's important. And I would just throw out to all of you who have any touch point to agriculture, whether you're a farmer or a producer, a student, that we all have this responsibility. When I grew up on my family's farm in Illinois, I farmed with my dad and my grandfather. When my grandfather was farming, 60% of the state of Illinois was in agriculture. Today, as you know, because of the success of farming and the efficiency gains that we've made, probably less than 1% of the population of the U.S. is involved in farming today. And that simply means that all of us who understand agriculture, who are involved in agriculture and farming, have the responsibility to communicate to the other 99%. And the good news is there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot that we can do, and it starts with really, I think, sharing our common values. I mean, I have never talked to a person yet who didn't really care deeply about healthy food, or someone who cares about a food secure world, or how do we minimize the footprint of farming and protect the environment. And those are all great common ground elements to build on and share those values. The other important thing that I've learned, and I am clearly an originator and an advocate for the technology, just based on the incredible good that it can do, and my knowledge of the thoroughness in the safety and the benefits that it provides. And too often as an advocate, I would focus on the critics. The folks, from organizations who simply are never going to accept this type of technology. And often what I forgot is that the vast majority of people are in the middle. and they just want good, straightforward answers. They want to be involved in dialogue, and that's really where we need to put our attention and put our focus as we go forward. So I told you I'd share with you a little bit about science. How many of you are growers or work in farming operations? So probably about a quarter of the room. So these next few slides are for you. I'm going to tell you what's new and exciting, and again, there won't be any test here. And let me start with an exciting breakthrough in insect control, and those are corn plants, and it's bad when they don't have any roots because they don't grow good, and that's because the insect is eating on them. And the plants on the right contain a brand new gene that we've discovered that can protect the corn plant from corn rootworm feeding. And it's a very different approach than what's been used historically with the BT genes, which are the products that have come really from organic farming and organic gardening, and where we've introduced the BT gene into crops. This is a technology which is based on RNAi. And for those of you who are now hardcore biochemists and molecular biologists, when I went to school back at the University of Illinois in the 70s, we were taught that the DNA made the RNA that made the protein, and that was the central dogma. Obviously, it got a lot more complicated a few years ago when Andrew Fire and Dr. Mello discovered this new mechanism of regulation, or at least newly discovered, called RNAi. And that means that there's little messenger RNAs, RNAi derivatives, that can regulate gene expression. And that's what we've been able to do. We actually can go to the rootworm or any other insect pest, figure out what are the key genes that make it grow well, and then target an RNAi that knocks out that gene and very selectively can kill that insect. Very powerful method. We can put it in as genes in the plant, or we can actually formulate these RNAis, spray it on a bug, and get enough RNAi in to be a very targeted, a very specific biological control agent. So exciting breakthroughs, and we'll be launching our corn rootworm product based on that in just a couple of years. Another product that was designed specifically here for our western corn belt, I include Kansas and the Dakotas and Oklahoma in this area, has been our Drought Guard technology. And Drought Guard is really composed of two things. It's a biotech trait that is actually a sheathing protein that protects the machinery of the cell from degradation during heat stress. And it contains the advances from breeding, where we've been able to use these molecular markers to target corn hybrids that are super resistant to drought. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to put a drought gene into a corn genetics that's sensitive to drought. So the combination has given us a yield benefit. We're getting 5 bushels of yield benefit. The results this year are so good that we are already sold out on Drought Guard. We probably touched about 1 million acres, and so we've made the decision to expand Drought Guard to the rest of the Corn Belt, because every year there's a drought somewhere in the core Midwest, or a farmer has a sandy hilltop, or wants to cut the amount of irrigation and preserve water. And if they can substitute a gene for an irrigation cycle, that's a good thing for everybody. So that's a cool technology. And what's especially neat about it, and makes the point on a global basis, is we've actually taken that same technology, partnered with the Gates Foundation and CIMMYT, and have worked on how we create those drought-tolerant corn hybrids specifically for Africa. And the reason we picked Africa in this opportunity is everybody appreciates the important role that rice plays in the Asian diet. Well, corn plays that same role in Central Africa. It's the porridge. It's both a human and animal feed source. And what we've been able to do is breed with CIMMYT, create specially drought-resistant hybrids. We've launched 17 hybrids this year, and we have doubled the typical yields that are available. And it's just a nice example of private-public partnership. And one of the points I'll make is, these challenges are big. This was a 7-year collaboration, and we've created the largest corn breeding program in Africa together with CIMMYT to address this challenge. And it's the kind of thing we can do for all of the crops that I think are relevant for local production. Last thing I'll talk about as an example is an advance in herbicide tolerance. And I know herbicide tolerance isn't a real popular topic with a lot of folks, but let me just give you the other side of the story. Because when I was a kid and I would come home from school in the fall, I'd get off the school bus, I'd get on my dad's tractor, and we'd plow all of our fields because that's the way we controlled weeds. And it looked really good. We had great black dirt in central Illinois, and then when the wind came by, the dust blew off the field. When it rained, we would see erosion. And, we were using a lot of energy. Running that tractor up and down the field used a lot of greenhouse gases. Today, farmers can spray with a chemical, control their weeds. We've made the Roundup Ready technology available. It's lowered overall pesticide use, and most importantly, it has dramatically promoted conservation tillage. If you go back and you look at how many acres in the U.S. were on conservation tillage programs before biotech crops and look at today, we have doubled the footprint of conservation tillage in the United States. And that's been a very, very good thing for the environment. Yet we know there's been challenges. We've seen weeds become resistant to Roundup. We know that the long-term success is going to be built on using multiple products and multiple modes of action, and that's what we're doing. So, exciting. In just the last 2 weeks, we got the first approval from the USDA for our Roundup Ready Extend system, where we will bring the benefits of both Roundup and dicamba together on the farm for growers to get the benefit of 2 modes of action, which will give them better and more durable weed control. And it's a very also exciting example of a company-university partnership, because this gene was discovered by Professor Don Weeks at the University of Nebraska. And it's a great example of working closely with the university to bring an innovation into the marketplace that will help farmers. And incidentally, I show you examples here of the technology in soybean and cotton, which will be our first product launches. But this is a prime technology to be introduced into sugar beet and to be introduced into wheat and other crops to provide those multiple modes of action. And of course, for those of you who are really into it, the importance of designing new formulations with lower volatility, giving farmers better tools in terms of the spray technology and the nozzles that they use, and I'm absolutely confident that we can bring a tremendous product to farmers to benefit from them. So those are kind of established areas. The advances in breeding and biotechnology and in some of the new the chemistry work. Let me talk to you about some of the breakthrough areas that I find really fascinating. And I had a chance today to meet with some of the faculty who are who are specialists in soil health. And I think this area offers incredible promise for the future. Because if you think about it, everything I've talked about today has largely been above ground. It's been the genetics of the seed. It's been the traits that we can introduce into the seed. The opportunity to use a lot of these advanced tools now to understand soil in a way that's never been possible before is for me, going to be a fundamental breakthrough. You think about a teaspoon or a tablespoon of dirt. It can have millions, if not billions, of microbes. Now, I got my official PhD as a microbiologist, and I can tell you I would still be plating off one colony at a time if we were going to do this the old-fashioned way. But the advancement in the DNA sequencing tools literally lets us extract the DNA from that teaspoon of soil, do the sequencing, deconvolute the genomes, and print out tens of thousands of microbes and really create an incredible footprint of what's going on not only in an individual field, but in those 10-meter by 10-meter grids. And having that information lets us both discover new patterns and to be able to identify microbes that can be very beneficial. And I think this is exciting. I mean, in many ways, the human health field is ahead of us. One of the hottest areas in medical research today is understanding how the microbes that are on us and in us influence our state of health. And this may sound a little bit disgusting, but just to give you the magnitude, if you think of all your brain cells, your bone cells, and your blood cells, imagine that you've got 10 times more bacteria living on you than in you. So, we're more microbe than we are people. So keep that perspective, and that'll be that's what we're doing. And so, there's a great deal of interest in understanding, the relationship between the microbes that we ingest or the microbes on our skin and human health, and lots of examples. We're trying to do the same thing. We want to create probiotics that we can coat that seed with that can either enhance the uptake of nutrients or can provide for defenses against insects, nematodes, and other challenges in the soil. And the science is letting us tap into this. And I think the other area that plays well into this are the precision ag tools, because we can think as we map fields and we understand, different compositions of soil, different need for different plant populations, the ability to decide which microbe, how much microbes, to be able to use multiple microbes in a field, are possible. So we've had a lot of excitement in this area. Again, we've taken the approach of partnership. We've partnered with a Danish company called Novozymes, and we did our first extensive yield test this year. And basically, we were able to see a couple of bushel yield advantage in soybean, which is very significant, and 4 bushel advantages in corn with the best of the microbial strains. So early days, but for me, it's an area that's going to go through explosive growth and will become an important part of our soil health profile. And importantly, the ability to interconnect, the crop, the soil conditions, the microbe, the trait packages, the seed treatments in an integrated way that give growers the best approach to mitigating the challenges they face. And the last area I'll focus on is the incredible advances that are coming from data science or precision agriculture. I mean, we are literally right now living through the computerization of the farm. And I think about it this way. Agriculture is the last major industry to be digitized. I mean, we've already seen the transformation of the worldwide entertainment and communication as a result of data science. And, we've seen other industries, whether, it's any of our manufacturing industries, agriculture is the last great opportunity. Let me put it into perspective this way. The average new car has about 4,000 sensors in it that tell you everything from are you over the yellow line to all of your gauges and all of your recommendations and when to shift and when not to, and all those things. You're familiar with that. We're just a few years away when we're going to start to see thousands of sensors in our tractors, in our planting equipment, in our harvesting, in our cultivation equipment that are going to give farmers real-time information on compression, moisture levels, nutrient levels, and build that into the analytics. And here's the most important part. You see that guy up there on the upper right-hand side? He's probably not a big Kansas farmer. But what does he have? He has a cell phone. And this is what's transformational. And it plays the same way. You can give a farmer a better seed, and it can make a difference. A cell phone to a smallholder, in this case in India, I've seen the same thing in Africa, becomes the tool by which they can aggregate and discover markets. First fundamental question is, I harvest a crop. Should I take it to this village or that village? If I work with 3 or 4 other farmers, can I take more product and get a better price? Market discovery via the cell phone. Second thing, what's one of the biggest strategies that limit farming and smallholders? It's the loan shark. It's the middleman. It's the usury laws where they're borrowing money at 20, 30, 40%. You have a cell phone, you have instant access to credit and microcredit, and you cut through all that. And you cut out the middleman, and you cut out a lot of the stuff that goes on. And then finally, and this is where we've played in the game, the cell phone can become the delivery mechanism for personalized agronomic information. Today, believe it or not, we are reaching 3 million smallholders in India via a text message on a cell phone that's giving them weather advice. It's letting them know that the wind currents have changed, the moths will be flying in, they'll be laying their eggs, the eggs will harvest, and the caterpillars need to be mitigated over the next 6 days. That kind of information is game-changing, and in many ways, it's just like the better seed. A smallholder who can't even read and write, these tools can become so logical that they can use this information and make their decisions. And today, we're seeing about 7 out of every 10 smallholders in India have access to a cell phone. Africa, it's less, but it's going to move very, very quickly. And so that's an exciting area. So, we've gotten into this space originally to help plant our seeds smarter and better. But basically, if you think about a farming cycle, a farmer intuitively makes about 50 decisions to grow a crop. And, right now they've harvested their crops. They're sitting around and making decisions on which field should I fertilize, which crop should I go in which field. If I'm a farmer and I have I'm farming 5,000 acres. I might be farming 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 fields. The first question will be this spring, which field's workable? Which ones, if I statistically plant first, will give me the highest yields? In that field, what population should I plant? And then all the other questions on adding supplementary nutrition, mitigating disease or insects. Each one of those decisions now can now be taken and based on a digitized analysis of how that field has performed in the past, what it means like with the specific and genetics that are used, and importantly, with a lot greater insight into soil health and into moisture and the weather outlook. And it's an example. This is a farmer who farms in central Illinois, farms about 30 fields. First question they always ask in the morning is, where did it rain? How much rain, and where do I go? And in the old days, you'd send your hired man, or you'd start calling up your neighbors, or send your dad out. Today, the ability to map moisture is more accurate than a rain gauge, and doing it from a very sophisticated intercept of the Doppler radar. And that's an area that we're looking at. This year we'll launch another tool called our Nitrogen Advisor, where we've been able to look at nitrogen levels that are applied, look at the dissipative processes, whether it's rainfall, moisture, weather events, or denitrification, and come up with models that help farmers make better decisions on whether it's economical to do more, whether they should add supplement nutrition. And so those are the kind of tools that I think are going to be exciting, that are going to be transformative, that again, bring the advances in biology and information technology together. Last point I want to make, and this is so critical, and I've tried to emphasize it several times, is nobody can do this by themselves. And partnerships, whether it's on discovery, whether it's on development, whether it's delivering technology into the marketplace, are incredible. And we had a chance today to meet with faculty, talk to a lot of folks. We had the chance to tour the Wheat Innovation Center and see what wheat growers have funded in terms of bringing new innovation into Kansas for Kansas farmers. We enjoy a long relationship with Kansas State, particularly in the wheat breeding area, but also in other areas around pest control that are very important. And I think as we look into the future, one of the ways we all address the challenges of tackling both big problems and doing it with a finite amount of resources is to work together. And I think public-private partnership is absolutely a key, and I see a lot of exciting opportunities to work together, and I hope we follow that up here. And in many ways, one of the interesting stories I'll tell you kind of brings this all together. I consider Norman Borlaug one of my mentors. I had a chance to know him the last 20 years of his life. We worked together on projects on technology transfer to developing countries. I visited Norm at his home in Dallas about a month before he passed away, and he was a pretty weak and frail guy in the corner by the fireplace, and we got to his room. I was there with a couple other folks, and we went down to say our goodbyes, and we started talking about the science. We started talking about Drought Guard. We started talking about the new breeding technologies, and he starts perking up, and the next thing I know, he's standing up and he's lecturing us on, as only Norm could do, on what we needed to do. And then he got a tear in his eye, and Norm, I said, Norm, what's the matter? Did we say something? He goes, no, it's just I realize I'm not going to see all this stuff happen. But importantly, what he said was, what I'm worried about is who's going to take it to the next level. And his request was, how do we fund more wheat and rice breeders? And so another point of collaboration with Kansas State is the work that we've done to support the combination of Beachell and Borlaug scholars. And as you know, Professor Beachell got his training here, has been an instrumental rice breeder, and between Norm and Professor Beachell, they did tremendous things to help smallholders around the world. So we agreed to fund fellowships and scholarships. I think we're now up to 75 PhDs who have been trained in wheat and rice breeding, and I'd just like to acknowledge that there's 4 of them who have an affiliation here with Kansas State, and I think, I don't know, I think 3 of them are here. I know I've talked to Sandra, Sarah, and Bahar. Are you guys all here? I know I'm not going to embarrass you and ask you to stand up. There they are. Okay, so thank you so much, and it's really an important partnership that is one that I'm really proud of, and it's still a very emotional one because, as I said, Norm was a special person in my life. I'm going to close, and I'm going to make one last point that I told you I'd share with you my dream and what I think is possible. The challenge of food security is an enormous one, and I'm not going to tell you that the answer is going to be just all new genes and all new seeds. I actually like what the National Geographic did this last year when they outlined their how do we feed 9 billion people, and they talked about clearly the need for sustainable intensification and improving yields. They talked about being more efficient, particularly with water use and nutrients, but also clearly we have an enormous opportunity to reduce waste, whether it's waste that's lost on the farm, in storage or transportation, or frankly in the kitchen, and so that's huge. And we can all do a better job in our diets in terms of our calories and how we consume those calories. So it's going to take all of these areas working together, but the role of innovation to drive sustainable yield is undoubtedly super important. If you look at the right-hand side, the blue line is world population, and the dotted lines are what's happening in the future. The solid lines are where we've been. But you can see, as we talked about, 9.5 billion people by 2050, just 35 years from now. And you can see that, as we increase education, particularly education with women and women's health, we'll see that population flatten. It's happened everywhere in the world, and we will level out on a world population. The other important thing is food production, and you can see the red line. That's what we need to do to double the food supply, and you can see it's a huge challenge, and I don't make light of it. But the important thing to recognize is that green line, and that's the amount of world land that is actually farmed around the world to meet the food security needs. And you can see it has already started to taper off. To feed the last 2 billion people who joined our planet only required about an additional 100 million acres of farmland. As we increase and intensify sustainably our ability to grow crops in the Americas, to be able to dramatically increase yields in other world areas, I believe that we can not only achieve food security, but that we can actually start to lessen agriculture and farming's footprint around the planet. Now, for you farmers, I want you to be clear, I'm not saying to sell your farms, because I think we are great producers, and we will be in the game and be the breadbasket for a very, very long time. But they are clearly going to create an opportunity where we think about which lands should be taken out of farming, which ones would be better used if we reforested, which ones would be better served for the public as wetlands or sinks to fix CO2. So my goal and what excites me is a world where we're smart about our innovation. We look at all the other opportunities to enhance food security, but we take the bold step forward, and we rely on science and technology to address what I think is the world's greatest challenge, and I think we can do it. So thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm looking forward to the questions, and let's just jump right into it. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience.